We continue our coverage of the 2013 NBA Draft. Tim Roye for Warriors.com, and the Warriors don't have a draft pick in this year's draft, but that could change on draft night. And so to help us break down some of the players who may be coming in from overseas, Fran Fraschilla, a longtime college basketball coach at Manhattan, St. John's, and the University of New Mexico, and of course has been working with the ESPN and covering the draft. And Fran, we appreciate your time. And I was kind of curious as how you ended up with the niche of being the guy who covers the foreign players.
Good question, Tim. I have a great passion for the game at every level, and I guess it started, aside from being a junkie my whole life, I think it started when I coached a youngster at Manhattan from Spain, and then prior to his senior year, we took our team to Spain. It was my first real taste of international hoops. Since then, I've been invited to speak in 10 or 11 countries to do clinics. And when I got to ESPN in 2002, the people who were running the NBA draft said, "Hey, you've got a little bit of experience with this. Would you like to help us out on the international side?" And just coincidentally, at the same time, being here in Dallas, Donnie Nelson of the Mavericks started a Reebok Euro Camp, which is essentially the international version of the NBA Combine in Chicago. Donnie asked me to work it. I did, and it got to the point, Tim, where I'm obsessed with international hoops now. Most of the guys that are in the NBA internationally, I've had a chance to coach at the camp, guys like Nicholas Batum and Goran Dragic, Serge Ibaka. So I found my niche, and I really, really like, watching hoops of all kind, but particularly fond of the way they play internationally.
From a coaching standpoint and from an analysis standpoint, how do you translate how they play, say, in the EuroLeague as opposed to maybe how they could play in the NBA? I mean, how do you take that skill set they have overseas and try to apply it to the NBA?
Well, it's a great question. It really is. And I think early on in this whole process, teams struggled with that. We saw some major busts that were on the international scene. You know, after Dirk Nowitzki and Pau Gasol got over here, everybody was looking for the next Dirk or Pau, and that's just not realistic. Teams have put way more resources into international scouting than ever before. And I think just through trial and error, we now understand that, for example, and I've used this example before, if the NBA is the major leagues, then EuroLeague competition at its highest level is like AAA in baseball. And college basketball, quite frankly, would be like AA. So you try to, if a guy is playing well in EuroLeague and he's a young player, there's a very good chance his skills are going to translate to the NBA level. So it's taken a while to figure that out. I'll just remind you that Ricky Rubio averaged 4 points a game in his last year in Barcelona, and Brandon Jennings never got off the bench really very much for his Italian team, and yet these two guys have become, more than adequate NBA players, needless to say. So it's a trial and error process, I think, on the part of clubs that's taken a good decade or so to kind of try to figure out.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at. It's just like drafting kids out of college in the sense where you can't really look inside their heart and figure them out, and there's certain things you can look for. One of the guys that totally fooled me was when the Warriors traded and they picked up this kid Nicholas Skidishvili, who had been drafted, I believe, by Denver very high. If you watched him work out before a game or at practice and looked at his fundamentals, and you would go, wow, look at this guy. He can handle, he can shoot a little bit, but when you put him in a game, he would just disappear. You wouldn't even see him out there. He was the cautionary tale, because even in Italy at Benetton in Treviso, he wasn't playing very much. It just so happened that he was a workout warrior. He was young. There was a great deal of buzz about him. But it's different now because there are very few guys like him where teams will take a player like him that hasn't proven himself, internationally. And in fact, this year there is one guy, the young man from Greece, Adeta Kunbo, who's only 18 years old, and a number of teams, in fact,
virtually every team was in northern Italy this past week because while the Euro camp was going on, the Greek under-20 team was playing, and he's one of those guys that doesn't have a lot of high-level international experience that's likely to be a first-rounder. But everybody else who I think will be drafted in the first round is a proven player in Europe. So that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be great NBA players, but at least you have somewhat of a track record. Skiddish really had none at that time.
So you started to reference one of the players who's one of the top prospects coming over from overseas. So why don't we get at it and tell us who we should look for on draft night?
Well, I think there's 5 guys that are going to be first-round picks this year, in my opinion, if they all stay in, and I think they will. And that would be Dennis Schroeder, a guard from Germany, Giannis Antetokounmpo, the young man I mentioned, who's 18 years old, 6'9", Sergei Karasev, a 6'7" wing player from Russia, who's 19 and playing at a very high level right now in European basketball, Rudy Gobert, a 7-footer from France, with a lot of potential, 7'5" wingspan, and then Lucas Nogueira, another lengthy youngster who's a Brazilian playing in Spain. Those 5 guys are likely to all be first-round picks, with the 2 guys going highest, I believe, Tim, point guard Dennis Schroeder from Germany and the 6'9" wing player from Greece, Antetokounmpo, who at 18, I think, and I got to see him twice this past week, reminds me of a high school All-American. I think he would have been a top 5 player in the high school class of 2013. But that doesn't necessarily translate to being ready for the NBA.
Do you see a scenario where, say, a team takes a guy like that and then says, we're going to assign one of our player development coaches and we want you to go down to the D-League, don't even think about the NBA this year, and just go down and play and practice every day, and we'll see you next year. Could a team ever have the luxury of doing that?
Well, I think so. I think because more and more NBA teams, as you know, are aligning themselves with D-League teams, and there's becoming more of a farm system right now. A number of teams have their own D-League team, as you know. But I have a feeling with some of these guys, for example, Nogueira and Antetokounmpo, that they're likely to be drafted in the first round, and depending on a team's salary cap, the player's particular arc of development, I think it's more likely right now that you'll see them stay in Europe where they're comfortable, where they can get a lot of playing time and gain that experience before they come over. And then even then, some of these young guys, like Antetokounmpo and Nogueira, could be on rosters and still play some D-League basketball, just go back and forth. So I think that's very viable. And really, I don't see anybody in this draft internationally that's going to really have a dramatic impact on an NBA team next year anyway.
Thanks, Coach.
You got it, Tim.
My thanks to Fran Fraschilla. I'm Tim Roye for Warriors.com. And by the way, if you didn't know, Coach Fraschilla's record at Manhattan was 86-34, 35-24 at St. John's, and 55-41 at New Mexico. His overall collegiate record, 176 wins and 99 losses. He comes with great credentials. Against our coverage of the 2013 NBA Draft here on Warriors.com.